Hello, everyone. Welcome to Boring Trainers, not in my organization. My name is Brian Washburn, and I am the co-founder and CEO of a company named Endurance Learning. I would love if you want, as you're joining, go ahead and drop your name, where you're from, into the chat. We'll do some introductions in just a bit. And in front of you on the screen, you can see a QR code that'll take you to my LinkedIn page. And so if we are not, for some reason, connected yet on LinkedIn, I'd love to connect. Why connect with me? Well, that's where I drop a lot of just random thoughts throughout the week. So, for example, today I decided to put a thought about just pre-session trivia. So hopefully, if you're coming from the waiting room and into the session, you had a chance to see some pre-session trivia, and so I put some musings there. It's also where we'll put some different resources when we come out with those, like our activity cookbook or our trainer evaluation rubric or things like that too. So if you want to just see resources as they come out, please do connect with me. And also, if you just want to nerd out over training, drop me a note and let's chat either asynchronously on LinkedIn, or we can grab virtual coffee. Before we get going with today's session, we are going to, I just want to remind people that we do this every month. And so next month, we're going to shift gears. We've been talking for the past several months about classroom-based training. And today we're going to talk a little bit about a crash course of how to put together a train the trainer program. But next month, we'll be returning to uh, e-learning focus. And so next month's topic will be from drab to fab. Trick out your existing e-learning. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at a case study where we were working with an organization that had existing e-learning. They didn't want to scrap everything. They just wanted to give it a little bit of a facelift. And so that can be a really effective way to bring old existing e-learning into the 2025 or beyond. Excuse me, I have something going on in my throat. And so I'm taking a look and seeing where we have people from. And we have people coming from all over the country. We have somebody from France, which is exciting. We're going to take a look at where people are coming from in just a second. So over the course of today's webinar, we're going to be talking about train the trainer programs and put how to put together a train the trainer program, which are great if you have a group of people that you want to train on how to train. Now, if you have just individuals, it can get a little tricky. One of the things that we would like to offer, if it's helpful to you, is kind of the resources, and we're going to drop a bunch of resources into the chat over the course of the next hour. And because our vision at Endurance Learning is that every learning experience is engaging and it leads to change. And so we're happy to put these resources into your hands. Now, if you're thinking, these are great resources, I'm not sure if I have the time to put something like this together, we do have some asynchronous offerings. So we have a foundations of L&D as for people who are looking to get started in L&D. That's something that you can check out. And we also have a course that's going to be available in September called Training Delivery Basics. It's for people who you may have created training programs, but you're asking other people to deliver. And so that's something that will be available in September. If you stick around till the end of today's webinar, we're actually going to be raffling off a seat in that particular course. So stick around. But before I get to anything else, Tim, if you want to just kind of throw up a map, because we have people coming from all over the country and around the world, it'd be fun just to kind of see where people are joining from
We're
today.
going to have to rely on the comments for the moment. Um, little breakage in the map.
Oh, the comment, the
Yeah,
map
yeah.
does. All right, well, that happens
Skip over that for the moment.
on live reality webinars. But I'm seeing people from Central New York, Western New York. Go Bills! That is Bill's country, and I am from the Rochester area actually. And if you look over my shoulder over here, there's a piece of turf from what was formerly known as New Era Field. Let me get into today's session though. And as people are dropping their own kind of their names and where you're from, one other thing I would love just to hear from you all today when we think of the concept of having part-time trainers, subject matter experts, people who don't have training in their title, having people train. I'd love to hear from you in terms of if you just had one word or a phrase that comes to your mind when you think of a training session that's led by a subject matter expert or maybe just somebody who's a part-time trainer, they don't have training in their title. What do you think of when you're thinking of folks that perhaps don't have a lot of training on how to train? I'm seeing this should be a word cloud too. But I'm seeing boring, I'm seeing fast, I'm seeing overload, information overload, boring, anxiety, lecture. Lecture is definitely one way to deliver. And lecture itself isn't inherently bad. It's when it's just lecture that it becomes a problem. A lot of times, I can get it into, you're going to get me off track with some of these comments, but just real quick, we have a four-step training process that we call Anchor Content Application Future Use. And so delivering content is totally part of the learning process, but it does need to be kind of sandwiched with how do we connect that to previous knowledge and information, and then how do we see if people are getting it and give people an opportunity to get it. But you know, I and Leah saying it really depends on what kind of presentation you're going to get, which is totally fair. Non-attentive participants, death by PowerPoint, accomplished. Accomplished is a great way to recognize what subject matter experts bring. So over the course of this next hour, we're going to be talking about how do we put resources and perhaps develop the skills of people who haven't necessarily been exposed to training in order to or how to train in order to better deliver that training. And everything we're going to share with you has been what we've been using for the past number of years. And so it's not just kind of what we think, it's actually stuff that we found that works. And for example, last week I was in Minneapolis delivering a train the trainer session to a group that focused on medical devices. And the word that when I spoke with other people at the organization, the word that they described these trainers as was world class, which was really neat. And I've also worked with a lot of people who are subject matter experts who say, I don't do touchy feely. So I get adult learning, but that's not necessarily what I'm here to do. We're going to talk about that. Now, when we finished our train the trainer session last week, and I'm going to share the agenda that we use so that it's if you're looking to build something out, it could be something that you could borrow as well. This was one of the comments that somebody posted on LinkedIn after the session. By far, the best train the trainer I've ever been a part of. Seasoned and new trainers alike told me how much value they got from this 2-day program and how many tools they're walking away with. And while it is ego boosting, I'd love to hear it was the best train the trainer they've ever been a part of. This part that is just turning orange here was the most helpful piece of feedback that I got because a lot of times when I'm doing a train the trainer session, I'm working with people perhaps they have just started last week. Perhaps they've been training for 20 or 25 years and they come in kind of with this attitude of I've been doing this for 20 or 25 years. What else am I going to learn? What do you have to teach me? And so some of the things that we're going to share with you are things that we found that work both with new and experienced trainers alike. And so, what are we going to talk about? What are we going to cover today during today's session? First of all, we're going to take a step back, and one of the activities that I'll use in a Train the Trainer program basically asks, what kind of trainer are you? And so, that's where we'll start. And then we're going to take a closer look to some of the barriers that people have to being an amazing trainer. And so going back to all of those kind of words, adjectives, phrases that you came up with as we started this, whether it is accomplished or death by PowerPoint or boring or overload or wow, there's a lot of information here. We're going to take a look at some of the barriers that might be in place that preventing people from being amazing trainers. Then we're going to talk a little bit about if we can't bring people to a train the trainer session, what can we do? How can we support people in delivering more effective learning experiences? And finally, if we can bring people to a train the trainer session, we're actually going to figure out, well, what should that look like? And there's kind of not a one size fits all approach to that. So I'll talk a little bit about that as well. And of course, I can't go on before our lawyers have told us that we do need to put this advisory in there as well. So there is a participant advisory. There will be breakout discussions inside today's webinar towards the second half. That said, if you get what you need before the breakout session, I know that some people are like, I don't do breakout sessions. That's fine. Take what you want from today's session. For those who are sticking around, again, we're gonna raffle off a couple of things at the very end, and you must be present to win. So we're gonna raffle off a seat to one of those training courses as well as one of the books that I've written. What today's session will not be, however, is a session about actual activities. I'll model a few things, but today's session isn't going to be about activities. Now, we did do a session last month called Boring Training Activities Not on My Watch. And so if you are looking for what are some activities that we could use to engage people, or what are some different activities we could use in order to help other people be better at what they're doing. I encourage you to check out that webinar. You have the QR code. There is a link. My colleague Rachel has put a link to the recording for last month's session there. Bear with us. There was a little bit of technical difficulties, but hopefully it will be a valuable session. And there's some cool resources that you can download from that session as well. Now, all of that said, it sounds great that we have this train the trainer, best train the trainer I've ever attended. Another comment that came out actually during the beginning of that session last week when I was in Minneapolis was this. I'm skeptical. I just am not interested in adding games to my training. And that is such a fair comment, especially from somebody who has been doing training for a while. They're a professional, they're very good at what they do, they're very smart. And so somebody else comes along and says, there are better ways to do it, or maybe there's ways to improve. It is, and for this particular participant, they equated the term engaging or effective with adding games. And so I took that comment and I was like, that is a fair comment. If at the end of tomorrow you still feel that way, then let's have a conversation because clearly I'm not doing something right. And so I'll share with you kind of where that conversation went a little bit later in today's session. But the first thing that I typically do, and this is kind of something that I shared with you, is I will do an activity. It's based on a chapter in one of my books called "What's Your Formula?" And then it's also based on an article that I had published in TD Magazine through ATD. And this particular activity is called Presenter Know Thyself. And basically, what we want to do is to figure out where do you fall? If you had to fall in one of these quadrants, where would you fall? And so with these quadrants, let me talk through each of these, and then I'm going to give you an assessment. My colleague Rachel has put a handout into the chat, which we'll use in just a moment. But let me talk about what A, B, C, and D are when you're looking on the screen first, and then we'll go ahead and do the assessment. So the first quadrant in the lower left-hand corner, basically what we're taking a look at is your level of content knowledge and the amount or the way that you apply adult learning principles in your session. And so down in the bottom left-hand corner in quadrant A, these are folks that come in with maybe a low level of content knowledge, and they don't necessarily always apply adult learning principles or adult learning theory to what they're doing. Oftentimes, I'll label quadrant A as kind of the messenger, right? These are folks that have been told to share information with people. They may not have a lot of deep background in the information they're sharing. So it could be somebody from HR who's doing an orientation about the entire organization. They obviously they can't know every single thing about every single department, but they do need to orient people to what some of the different departments do. And it's usually kind of sharing, it's an information sharing session as opposed to using adult learning, right? So that's an example of a session or a presenter that might fall in quadrant A. Also, this might be a substitute, right? So if you can't make it to a training session, these might be the folks that you would call on to step in. So, for example, when I first started working at an eye bank, so cornea transplants. It was probably within my first month of working there. I was just out observing, or I wanted to observe a presentation that our organization was doing to nurses at a hospital. And I showed up. The nurses were showing up. I got a call from the person who was actually presenting saying, "I'm stuck in traffic. If I can't make it, the slide deck's there. Can you just go through the slide deck?" And I started to panic because I had a low level of content knowledge, and that was going to knock me off of being able to apply any adult learning theory in there. So that's another example of somebody who might fall into quadrant A. Also, as you take a look at these and as I talk through these, as you're thinking about where you might fall, it can very well be situational. Sometimes you're presenting on a topic that you know well, sometimes you're not. So you might kind of change quadrants depending on a session that you have to deliver. In quadrant B, this is our typical subject matter expert or our traditional subject matter expert. These are folks who know a ton about the topic they're talking about, but they don't always present in a way that's going to be engaging or lead to behavior change because either they haven't been exposed to how adults learn, or they're just not. There's lots of barriers. We'll talk about those as we get going here. But typically, quadrant B is your typical subject or your traditional subject matter expert. Quadrant C are folks that have lots of content knowledge and also they're able to apply principles of adult learning. So if I was thinking about myself and I was delivering a session about training skills or training design or things like that, I might fall in quadrant C because I feel like I can engage people and also I can answer lots of questions accurately. And I can back up a lot of what I'm saying with some theory. I've written books, I've written articles, things like that, right? So that content knowledge is married with adult learning principles. Now in quadrant D, these are kind of the pure facilitators, right? So in quadrant D, what you're going to find are people who know how to engage others. They know how to facilitate conversations, facilitate activities and instructions, debrief, but they may not know a lot about the topic that's being presented. I've found myself in this situation many times when we've created training sessions for a tire manufacturer, for example. When I was doing the train the trainer for that training session, I would model how some of the content should be delivered, but I was hoping and praying that they weren't going to ask me any technical questions because I was not going to be able to answer technical questions doing that. But I could facilitate the activities, I could engage people, I could debrief, I could set something up. I wasn't very knowledgeable about the content itself, right? So that's a quick look at kind of how we can figure out who is presenting and maybe what the strengths are and maybe some areas that could be developed. And so again, in the chat, my colleague Rachel posted a link. And so if you're able to go there, you're going to find a document up at the top. It says Presenter Know Thyself. And if you're able to either you use a different screen or even this screen and go through it, or if you just want to, if you have a piece of scrap paper at your table right now or at your desk, then feel free to take out that scrap paper and pen. And I'm going to go through just the assessment to help us figure out where we might fall when we put if we were to put a label on ourselves and the kinds of training skills that we offer. So here we go. So if you have downloaded it, great. You can click actually your answers. Or if you just want to watch me share the screen, we'll go through these questions one at a time. So here we go. So the first thing we're going to take a look at is our level of content knowledge. So get a training program in mind that you might typically have to deliver. And so just this works best when you're thinking about something that you typically have to deliver, not something that you might have to do one and done, but something that you typically deliver that you might be comfortable with. And so the first question is, or the first statement, and these are all yes, no statements. So you've spent considerable time exploring the history and theory of the underlying topic. I'm thinking of a train the trainer session here. And so I would say yes for that one. You've had considerable opportunity to be successful in putting the topic to use in the real world. I've done it for 20, 25 years. So yeah, I'll say yes. Your answers may not mirror mine. Don't feel like you need to have the same exact answers as I do here. People and yes or no, it's not better or worse. It's just trying to figure out how where do we fall here. People come to me for advice on the topic. I would say yes, they do. I've been asked to help others learn this topic. Yes, I have. I can confidently and accurately answer questions on this topic. I feel that my answer there again is yes. You hold a degree, certification, or other credential in the topic. I actually don't have a degree in public speaking, instructional design, other things like that. I'm not a CPTD. I don't have a credential, things like that. So I'll say no there. I've had an article published on the topic. I actually have, but just for the sake of this exercise, we'll say no there. All right. So once we finish there, don't get ahead of me. Don't go to the bottom yet. I'm going to tell you how to score yourself for just the top portion of this. So this, if you're thinking of that, the four quadrants, this is kind of that horizontal axis in our content knowledge. So for everything that you answered yes to, give yourself a point. For everything that you answered no to, take away a point. So for example, I have 5 yeses, which is 5 points, and then 2 no's. So I'll take away 2 points, and that gives me 3. Keep that number in mind. We're going to use that in just a moment. But let's take a look at the bottom of this page now. And this is more about the adult learning application. And so here, we'll take a look at these questions. So the first, or the statements, you are certain that your learners know why your information and content are important before they attend your presentation. For me, yeah, I think that I have a good feel for this. You deliver training programs in which you consistently spend most of the time talking and sharing content and information. I do not. I do share some information and then we'll do some activities, things like that. So I would click no there. You frame your learning objectives with phrases such as I'm going to share information about or I'm going to cover. Now, if you've ever taken any sort of class on how to create learning objectives need to be participant centered. This is my philosophy. So my learning objectives are always framed by the end of the session. Participants will be able to ... So I'll click no there. You believe a successful training program is characterized by high post-training evaluation scores and comments like, this was the best training ever. I love hearing those thoughts, so I'll click yes. You take pride in being able to deliver great training because you have great stories to tell. I have the best stories, so I'll click yes there. Even if you believe your content may be boring, you make sure to push through and give your participants all the information uh, you believe they need. I think that that is important. If people are coming to me for information, I need to give them the information. And then when running short on time, you forego activities to be sure you can deliver all your content. I like to make sure that I use a lesson plan to make sure I can kind of figure out where I am at any given point in a session. So I try not to run shorter on time, but I know those activities are important. All right. So getting through this bottom part, the scoring is going to be a little different. So don't get ahead of me here. So for every no answer here on the bottom part for the adult learning application, you're going to give yourself a point. For no, you're going to give yourself a point here. That's the opposite of what we just did up above. And for each yes answer, you're going to take away a point. So I have 3 no's, so that's 3 points. I have 4 yeses, that's minus 4 points. So I actually have a -1 here. All right. So if you can remember how many points you got for the first one and how many points you got for the second one, that's going to give us the coordinates of where we'd plot ourselves along this matrix. And so if you take a look at the next page, you see the 2 by 2 matrix here. And so you're going to basically start with that first number, and that one is going to go either left or right. So if you have a negative number, you're going to go to the left. If you have a positive number, you're going to go to the right. For me, I had 3, so I'm going to go over 3. And then for the adult learning piece, what you're going to do is if you had a positive number, you're going to go up that number of spots. If you had a negative number, you're going to go down. For me, I had -1, and so I'm going to go down. And so with the answers that I offered, I would find myself in quadrant B. So let me ask you, having gone through that, and let me put a poll up here. I'm kind of curious. Where do you all stand if you mapped yourself out? Do you fall in quadrant A, B, C, or D? So we'll give you a little bit of time for this. The
We
answers
are
are
getting what the dog is contributing. We're getting pretty heavy on about 60% on quadrant B, 38% on C, just a little bit in A and B.
yeah. No, and when I do this in person, during a train the trainer session, and as the answers are rolling in here, I'm just gonna just quickly talk a little bit about this. When I do this in person in train the trainer session, I think people get a little anxious about sharing where they fall. Doing the polling here virtually allows a little bit of anonymity. And honestly, there is no right or wrong place to be. All this does is give us a data point. And so somebody's saying, what if you are a zero with the first score? So if you're a zero with the first score, you keep that dot in the middle, and then you go up or down, and then you're going to fall between A and B or C and D. So good questions. And so all this does is give us a data point. All right, let's go ahead and where did I don't even know where my poll went. I've been moving things. Oh, there we go. It's being shared. Tim, you are on it. So thank you for that. So we're seeing that we have the bulk of people in B, 55%, 35% in C, about 4% in A, and 5% in D. This is a really nice distribution. Now, what does this mean? Now we have this data point. Brian, you've just plotted us on this graph. What does this mean? All right, so basically what this means is now you know, right? So if you fall in B, there's a few different ways if you would like to move above that line. Or if you fall in A, there's a few different ways that you can move to the right or up. If you fall in D, there's some different ways that you can move over to C. If you fall in C, that is great, and it doesn't mean that you can become complacent. And especially if you are asked, if you change positions, if you change roles, there's always going to be some different content knowledge to kind of challenge you with. So basically what this does is it gives us a feel for where do we currently start. And the reason I like to use this during train the trainer sessions is because it gives everyone a feel of where we start. And if I'm a B today, and I have to do a session this afternoon, it just because I attended a train the trainer doesn't mean I'm automatically a C, right? So are there ways to balance my subject matter expertise and my tendency to assume I know what the learners need, my tendency to push through some things? Is there a way to balance that? So one way is attending something like this. Another way is to co-facilitate, right? So find a D. Is there somebody who is at my organization a really skilled facilitator who might be able to co-facilitate, who might be able to, I can give the information and then they can facilitate the activity, things like that, right? So there's some ways to move from B to C without you yourself needing to become an expert in all of this stuff. There's a way to move from A to D, again, by actually whether it's partnering with somebody or just kind of working on webinars like this or reading articles or books or just practice. Honestly, practice is one of those ways as well. I'm taking a look at some of the questions. Could you please share the previous mapping definition of the quadrants again? And so Rachel, if you're able to find the Presenter Know Thyself article, I know that that was not something that we had queued up in terms of the resources that we have, but if you're able to find it, then I'd love to drop that, either a link to that or the PDF into the chat as well, which can give the explanations of these quadrants again. All right. I'm gonna actually shift gears here a little bit, but before I do, Tim, is there anything else that you're seeing in the chat that I need to kind of respond to before we go on?
The only thing I saw was someone asking, well, what if they fall on zero line with the first score?
Yep.
And I think you answered that pretty well, but I think it's important that people recognize this just gives you that positioning of where you need to grow for a particular session or where you may need to get support. So hopefully you were able to answer that question.
Yeah, and again, this isn't hyper scientific, right? This is based on what is good adult learning and what kind of constitutes a subject matter expert. And where what you answer today might be different than what you answer next week. I've found some people during train the trainer sessions say how I answered that yesterday morning and how I would answer it today would be different. Because now in that sense, they were saying because they were exposed to identifying things that they didn't even know they didn't know. So they would have kind of moved themselves down in terms of the adult learning principle mastery and things like that. So it just gives you a starting point and a data point, and now the question becomes, what do you do with it? Now, I'm going to move us along to another kind of really key question that we need to answer. Why can't everyone just be like us? I mean, if just the fact that you are here probably means that you are some sort of really effective trainer. So by like us, I mean amazing trainers. And here we're going to talk a little bit about what kind of barriers get in the way of somebody like a subject matter expert actually delivering something that's going to be engaging and leads to change, right? So we saw all those adjectives when we started, boring, overload, things like that. Well, I don't think that anybody gets up in the morning and looks at themselves in the mirror and says, how boring can I make my presentation today? Right? So there are some barriers that sometimes we don't even think about. And here I'm going to ask for a little bit of participation. So we're going to do kind of a family feud style activity. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts or your hypotheses in terms of what gets in the way. What kind of barriers are there that exist that prevent people, especially subject matter experts, from delivering something that's going to be engaging and leads to change? So we'll start to get some themes here. We'll call those out. I have worked with literally hundreds, if not thousands, of people who have been presenters. I've had this conversation a lot with a lot of different people, and we have the top five answers on the board. So let's go ahead and in that chat, if you're able to give me some thoughts in terms of what is it that leads to a presentation from the subject matter expert not being as effective or engaging as perhaps we would hope that it could be, not
I'm
realizing
going to
change.
suggest Leah has said being pressed for time.
Being pressed for time. Absolutely. It's a great answer, but if you're playing endurance learning feud, we have to say survey says, and then we have to see what the board has to say, and that is the number three answer, actually. Time constraints and competing priorities. Here's the thing with people, again, who are part-time trainers, who don't have training in their title, they have lots of other things that they're doing. And so if they are focused on other things and those things are really, really important to them, and somebody says, hey, can you deliver this training? It can be an ego boost. It can feel good, and certainly they can say, "Yes, of course, I can do that." And so when there are other priorities that really require their time and attention, and when they've only been exposed to whether it is lectures in college or lectures in professional setting, professional symposia, or whatever it might be, it can become difficult to place any priority on developing anything other than a slide deck. And so that kind of frame of mind or point of view can get in people's way and push the idea of creating a more engaging presentation down in terms of priorities, especially when they have lots of like 18,000 other things they need to do, emails to respond to, phone calls, and important stuff around the organization doing. What else you got, Tim?
I'm going to call on quote Kim Zerby because I think said well, SMEs equal too much information for a time, don't know how, where, what to trim. Too knowledgeable, wrote Lisa Weaver. So there's Monica Giller wrote too much content. And Vicky Watts wrote they have so much to tell us. So we have a lot of good on that theme. Too much content.
Too much content. Let's see what the survey says. Number two answer is the curse of knowledge, which I think is a good way to frame all of those comments that people were sharing. So the idea that when we ask an expert, when we ask an expert to present, this curse of knowledge can be a double-edged sword, right? So they're the people who have the information, who have the keys that everybody else needs. And sometimes the experts have an underlying assumption that everybody else has some sort of foundational knowledge, that everybody else is actually as excited as they are about that information. Sometimes the curse of knowledge leads to the overuse of acronyms or just assumptions in terms of what people know or should know as they're kind of soaking in all the wisdom that the subject matter experts can get. So that is definitely another challenge and barrier to being able to present something in an effective way. What else you got, Tim?
So we'll see if we continue on our streak here, or if this is on the board or not. We've got several people saying a lack of confidence.
Ooh, lack of confidence. What do you say? Let's hear what the survey says. The survey says, that is not on the board. That said, I think that that is a really, really good answer, right? That can definitely be a barrier that I haven't put up here on the board, but it is something that we cannot underestimate, right? So sometimes when people, especially experts, get very nervous, and oftentimes nerves indicate how invested people are to be good, to succeed. And when somebody especially is not comfortable in front of people, and the fear of speaking is right up there anytime that people are surveyed in terms of biggest fears, fear of public speaking. And so the idea of not having confidence in front of a group can absolutely get in the way. I love that answer. It wasn't in my top five, but it doesn't mean it is no less legitimate of a response in terms of some things that can get in the way. Thank you for pointing that out.
Okay, we have Amy wrote lacking clear, defined objectives or too many objectives. And there were a bunch of others that I feel like were related to adult learning theory and understanding intention.
Yeah, lacking clear objectives, survey says. Number five, unclear expectations and objectives. When we just go to somebody and say, hey, can you design this training, or can you deliver a training next week? Um, that can mean lots of different things to lots of different people. And so, oftentimes, subject matter experts or other kind of part-time trainers struggle to be engaging, struggle to put something together that's going to lead to change when they don't know exactly what people should be able to do by the end of the session. This is when we start pulling in games like Jeopardy because it should be fun, it should be engaging, but that doesn't necessarily help lead to change or even show us that people have some skills. And so that is definitely legit up there. Now, for the purposes of time, I'm just gonna go through the number four and the number one answer as well. So the number four answer up here is the attitude, and I've mentioned it before, and I've actually had this statement said to me several times in person. I don't do touchy-feely. This is my this is my area, this is my domain, this is my area of expertise. And I get that you as a trainer want to engage people with adult learning theory, but I don't do touchy-feely. It goes back to the comment that we had earlier in terms of I'm skeptical, I don't want to do games. And so just kind of introducing a different or new way to do something can sometimes lead to anxiety, can sometimes lead to resistance to adopting new methods. And so there are some ways to navigate this. One way is kind of asking the question, what is touchy-feely to you? What does that mean? Because just giving people an activity, allowing people to have some time to discuss, to process information, that's not touchy-feely. That's just seeing if they get it, right? So getting a little bit more clarity, because I think it's really easy for people to dismiss good training as touchy-feely or I don't do games or things like that, right? And the number one really important barrier that we should keep in mind is that subject matter experts, especially, they make money for the organization doing other things. And so the fact that they are actually asked to train as well is can be perceived as, well, this is bonus, right? I'm doing a favor by bestowing my information upon others, but I was hired to do something, and that's what I make money for the company doing. And so where sometimes I've gotten into trouble is I've tried to turn everybody into instructional designers, and that doesn't work. Basically, what I need to do in the frame of mind I need to have is, what does that person need to be successful in order to go forward? And there's a few different routes for that. First of all, if we can't bring people together for a train the trainer session, I'm gonna just give you 5 different resources that I would put up on my intranet. Now, just putting something up there doesn't guarantee that people are going to use it or use it in the right way or even know how to use them. So they might need some sort of explanation, explainer video, blog post, something that goes along with these. But these are 5 resources that I would make available to anybody who needs to train and who has any sort of interest in being able to do something new or differently or better with their training skills. And so my colleague Rachel has just given a flood of these in the comments. But our issue is everyone thinking they're trainers and doesn't let the actual training team take the lead. So that's a change management. So Adrienne just put a comment in there in terms of our issue is everyone thinking they're trainers and doesn't let the actual training team take the lead. There's a change management piece to that, right? So the way that we frame the conversation and invite people to be better at what they do really matters. There's a comment that my old supervisor would exercise on me at least once a month. He said, "Brian, you're right, but are you being effective?" And so telling somebody that they're not doing it right is does not always is not always well received. Finding other champions around the organization who are not in the training department but have had good experiences could be a really good way to get people on board. So if we can't bring people together for a train the trainer session, the first resource I might provide is our Endurance Learning's training activity cookbook. There are 86 different activities. Some of them are complex to deliver, and some of them are super simple. I definitely encourage you to check that out. Put it up in your company's intranet for to help people, kind of come up with different ways to engage people. Another thing that I would offer is structure. How do you structure your session? Just opening up PowerPoint and starting to put together slides is a recipe for disaster. Some people do it really well, most people don't. I like to use a lesson plan template, a training design and lesson plan checklist. So this is after you've put together your lesson plan. This is a way to check it over and make sure that it's going to be effective. So just a few things to check for. And then beyond that, if people aren't able to go to a train the trainer but are willing to get some feedback, something I like to do is use an actual feedback form that you can use if you're going to observe people, and it helps to structure your feedback for people in order to keep that feedback tight and keep it consistent, whether you're going to observe person A on Monday or person B on Thursday, you can always give them you're looking for the same things. And then along with that is our facilitator evaluation rubric. This is where some of those things from that observation form come from in order to be more in order to really understand what what does high level performance look like? What does kind of in the middle look like? What does it look like when we're just starting to develop these skills? Now, if we are able to put together a train the trainer program for people, we need to think about what are these people actually doing? So there's typically two kind of routes that we can go. The first is when we think of people who just have to present information, right? So I work with a lot of state early education agencies, and they have curricula that their trainers deliver all over the state that's been developed. And the trainers are just out there to deliver the training, right? So they just have to deliver training. They don't have to design, they just have to deliver the training. And then you have folks who have to design something, right? These are usually the folks that put together slide decks that can be pretty intense and technical. Um, so you have people who have to design something and then deliver it. So there's two different audiences. So if people are just delivering, it doesn't make sense to train them on how to design training as well, because they may not need that skill. So let's take a look at what an agenda would look like for both of these different types. So with people who are delivery only, typically, I think that we have another resource that is kind of an e-booklet on train the trainer programs, which gives you a little bit more information than I'm going to be able to go over here. But When it comes to delivery only, these are some of the key pieces that I will put into an agenda. I'll examine myths and misconceptions when it comes to training, design, and delivery. And we get people starting to talk about some of these myths and misconceptions and some data and some statistics that you might find if you Google, how do people learn, but they're actually not rooted in science. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we'll do that activity, right? What kind of trainer are you? And we'll kind of figure out where do people stand? What quadrant do people fall in? And then we talk a little bit about engaging versus effective because a lot of times people come to me and say, Brian, can you help me put together a more engaging training? What are some activities I could use? And there's a difference between engaging versus effective. And so we talk about that a little bit. We'll do some adult learning basics. And then for people who are delivering training, they don't need to create learning objectives, but they do need to understand what is the connection between the people who designed this training and the objectives they put in there and the activities. And so if we find ourselves behind time, what is the purpose of the activities? What can we cut out? And then ownership strategies, right? So how do we actually own something and make it credible in our delivery if we haven't designed it ourselves? So what are some ownership strategies? A lot of times that talks about storytelling and the power of bringing in your own stories or data or other things like that. And then we do teach backs with feedback, right? So this is the kind of the cherry on top, right? So this is why people are there. They're there to improve their delivery, but they can't improve their delivery until they're given some tips and strategies. When it comes to people who are designing and delivering, the agenda's similar, but there are some key differences, and I'm going to kind of highlight those key differences. For delivery only, you don't need to create stuff, so you're not creating learning objectives. You're not kind of creating all sorts of things. For design and delivery, we need to talk about how does training stick? We need to talk about what does it look like to actually create good learning objectives because well-written learning objectives can kind of write the rest of your lesson for you. We talk about using structure, using a lesson plan, using that training activity cookbook and integrating some of those activities into what you're delivering and then putting it all together with some teachbacks. Now, with all of that said, now this is a really quick high level agenda, and my colleague Rachel has put together or has given a link to some more detail on this. But something that doesn't go on the agenda but can make or break a train the trainer session is this idea of a parallel process. Not just talking about theory, not just introducing activities and strategy, but also modeling the behaviors that you're looking for, and then pausing to say, I don't know if you realize what I just did there, but when I did that activity, this is what happened. This is why I did that activity. So being able to model some of those strategies that people can just put in their back pocket that make the difference between overload with information and engaging or effective training. So when we take a look at some of these train the trainer programs, and going back to the comment that I had at the beginning of my session last week, I'm skeptical. I just am not interested in adding games into my training. The conversation ended with her saying, "Okay, I believe this isn't about games and gimmicks. Some of these engagement strategies are super easy to weave in." And that's the key piece, right? We don't need to create a whole group, a whole division of instructional designers or master training facilitators. What we do need is to equip people with the tools, with the resources, with the ideas, and to show people what good training could look like or feel like. I'm gonna pause here, and unfortunately, I've talked too much, and so you won't have as much time as I was hoping to have in small group conversations. But we are gonna put you into breakout rooms for about 5 minutes, and so my colleague Rachel is gonna put one last handout into the chat here. Now, if you're like, ooh, breakout time, I'm gonna head out. Just remember, must be present to win. So stick around for the drawing. But with a small group conversation, what we're gonna do is we're gonna put you into groups, and we're gonna ask you just to think about some of these different concepts that I've talked about in a few different ways. One is I want you to think about what's possible with any of this stuff. I also want you to talk in your small groups about what are some of the weaknesses that you see. Yeah, Brian, that all sounds great, but here are 5 different challenges I could see with this and talk through those weaknesses in your groups. Or choose a different hat to put on. What would the feelings be of people who would have to go through a train the trainer program? Or what would the feelings be if you put some resources on the intranet? Would people even use them, or how could you get them to use them? Or what kind of data do you have that tells you what kind of trainers you actually have in your organization? So you're obviously in 5 minutes, you're not going to be able to have all those conversations, but I would choose one of those hats to put on, either what's possible with some of the stuff we're talking about here today. What are some of the challenges that you could see? What are some of the feelings that people at your organization have? What might be some data that could help you decide what kind of train the trainer program you want to put together? We're going to throw you into small groups. Um, Use that handout to guide your discussion. I just want you to talk a little bit about some of the stuff I've talked about and how you could actually see it being used, either in, what's possible or what are the weaknesses, things like that. I'm going to stop talking because I'm taking up your talk time. We're going to bring you back in about 5 minutes and we'll wrap up here. All right, welcome back from those breakout rooms. Looking at the comments here, it looks like I love when people say they found the breakout rooms valuable. Some people just come for the information, and then when it's time for the breakout rooms, they hop off. It's fine. I find that the breakout rooms give people an opportunity just to connect with other people who are on the session, but also to process all this information. There's a ton of information I throw at you. So thank you for those that stuck around. And that's all we have for you today. So again, if you have any need for train the trainer help, train the trainer services, we're happy to give you an extra set of hands. But I hope that these resources were really, really helpful for you today. So until next time, happy training, everyone.